Sometimes in life we just suffer. Sometimes it's from being totally withdrawn, or so much stress that we are totally anxious, or so tired that we are totally burnt out. But our current position is not our final destination. No, indeed. There's hope. So whether it's your personal life, your career, your relationship, your business, or your job, we say there's reason to believe again. And we present from Andy's personal development, the breakout room. It's the place for health, happiness, and prosperity. Stay tuned for more. Hi, and welcome to this edition of the Breakout Room. We are live today, and we have a guest that is returning in a short space of time because we both felt that the quality of the first episode or the first recording was not good enough, and you certainly deserve better. So we thank you for being with us. For those who are going to be on later when this is aired again the second time, we thank you for your continued commitment and support to the Breakout Room. Our guest, of course, is Kam Knight, and this episode is entitled Mastering the Mystery of the Mind with Kam Knight. So who is Kam Knight? Well, he's a coach, international speaker, and best-selling author of a dozen books in the area of mental performance and personal mastery. He is known for bringing fresh solutions and insights that are a rare departure from traditional ideas. And because of his fresh perspective, his books have become the gold standard for their respective topics, which have helped over 500,000 people. And when he's not coaching or writing, he is traveling. Well, there's so much more that we can say about Kam Knight, but we let him take the spotlight and tell us about him and his work, his impact, his books, and what he sees for the future as far as his work and the world is concerned. So without further ado, let's welcome live into the breakout room our guest, Kam Knight. How are you, sir?
Thank you very much, Andy, for that awesome introduction and for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, you deserve the introduction, and we appreciate you, and thank you for taking the time to come and join us yet again.
Yeah.
So, here's an intriguing question that probably I didn't ask the last time.
All right.
When did this new way of thinking, this new mindset dawned on you? And what was that moment like when you discovered that you could actually change the way you see things and the way in which you approach things?
So it started when I first started getting into personal development. It was in the early 2000s. And there was a lot of books that I read that were very inspirational and motivational. And they more or less said you can reach for the stars. Though all of that stuff released a lot of positive feelings and created this sensation that yes, anything is possible, but I rarely act on it or I got the results that these emotions and this inspiration made me feel. And so I felt that there was a gap in a lot of the content that I was coming across. There was something missing. The advice was sound, but there were some deeper layers keeping people from going from the advice into actually taking action that wasn't being covered. And I felt like I wasn't making the progress that I should have been, or in a way promised by a lot of what I was reading and a lot of what I was coming across. I just kept getting held back. And so I went on an exploration on my own to really kind of get deeper and to learn more and learn where the gaps were and try to fill in that stuff. And that's how I kind of came to, a lot of the ideas that I came to. And I feel like a lot of people really resonated with it, which is I'm really happy about, which is why a lot of my books have done so well as my courses.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for sharing, Cam. So, how did you proceed then to develop what you have discovered into an actual technique so that it becomes something real, something tangible that is now benefiting people, as they say, over 500,000 people around the world?
Yeah. So when I was, reading the books, attending the seminars, and doing all the coaching, I was learning a lot about the complexities of the brain. And over time, I my brain was taking and processing all this information that I was receiving, actually not just from books, seminars, and coaching, but also from my experiences of traveling. I've traveled to over 100 countries around the world, and people who followed my journey will say that I left no stone unturned. I
Okay.
wasn't just, yeah, traveling to touristic places like Paris and the Eiffel Tower or London and the Big Ben, but I really went to all corners of the globe. I slept in the oldest rainforest in the world in Timor, Malaysia. I hiked the second largest ice sheet in Greenland. I encountered so many indigenous cultures from the Kuna in Panama to the Maasai in Africa to the Aboriginals in Australia, the Inuits in Greenland. And together, my brains just started to kind of compile my experiences and the information I was gathering. And at a certain point, I was like, hey, wait a minute. There's a part of our brain designed to hold us back. There's a part of
Mm-hmm.
our mind built to keep us from growing and making progress. And I call this part resistance. And as we had talked
Okay.
last time, it's a brick wall that we hit anytime
Yeah.
we want to do something, but we can't. And the reason this was so profound for me is because for most of my life, I wanted to do more and have more. And even though I had a good amount of success, I always felt like I missed the mark or fell short, or the success was just much more difficult and stressful than it needed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And because of all these experiences, I realized, oh, yeah, wow, okay, this is why it's difficult to do the work. This is why we procrastinate and sabotage. And then I also started to come across this concept of the wanting mechanism. And the wanting mechanism is actually kind of interesting. And I came about it because after traveling to enough places, I began to see a standard story play out with the humans over and over, time and time again. And it's a story of sultans, kings, and emperors fighting wars, battles, and conflicts to win empires, kingdoms, and nations. And the more I learn about these emperors and sultans and kings, is that no matter how much they had, they always wanted more and more
Ah,
and more.
yeah.
And a lot of some of the most famous leaders in the world, like Alexander the Great or Napoleon, and we can just name on,
Mm-hmm.
they they actually ended up dying because their need for more. And I
Oh,
and I realized we humans, it wasn't just them, this wanting. It wasn't just unique to them, it was really unique to all it's actually a part of all of us, where we
yeah.
have wants and desires, and no matter how much we get, we'll always want more. And
That's
that wanting mechanism can be very overactive or be very strong or want things right away, and it never ends. It'll just keep wanting more. So I realized that the part of the brain that creates wants is completely unrestrained. It's creating endless wants and desires one after another. The only job of this part of the brain, which I call the wanting mechanism, is to create wants. And it's cranking out wants day in and day out at a pace faster than anyone can achieve.
hmm.
So you can think of this wanting mechanism like a simple on-off switch that gets flipped based on certain cues. It sees someone with nice shoes and it wants it. The latest iPhone comes out, it wants that
Yeah.
too. Someone attractive walks by and we want that as well. And the
Mm-hmm.
wanting mechanism creates so many wants in a single day, we don't have the time, energy, or resources to achieve them. So the wanting mechanism creates wants, and then we have a part of our brain called resistance that checks to see if that want is achievable or achievable for us. And so, as humans, especially in this time, we're kind of caught because we have all these wants, but then we have a part of our brain holding us back from achieving them. And so, it's not about having motivation and discipline. It's about understanding these two parts of the brain, why they're there, how they work, and how they hold us back. Because if a person is stuck and not able to move forward in their life, it's likely because they don't understand what's going on. And would really help for them to understand that this dynamic.
Yeah, you took us to school there, Cam. Thank you so much for sharing it. And as you mentioned, Alexander the Great, I remember doing some studies on this individual. He became the king of Macedonia at the age of 20 and died
Yeah,
12 years later at the age of 32 after literally conquering the world as it existed in his time.
right.
And one of his most famous quotes remains with me: a tomb now suffices for him whom the world was not enough. And
Exactly.
that's a very important thing to really come to face with as a reality. Why do we have all these wants? We want more and more and more and more. Isn't there some point in time that there's some level of satisfaction we can come to? And I say that because based on what you're saying, I get the whole idea, I get the philosophy. It's wholesome, it's holistic. But at the end of the day, if we don't understand the process of how these two parts of our brains work, we will continue to strive and maybe burn ourselves out like Alexander did or the others. So here's the other question I want to ask how can one recognize that they need to take time out to focus on how these two aspects of the brain function so that they do not make the mistakes of so many people, those who have gone on in the past, the greats, and some who are currently
Yeah.
making that same mistake now.
Yeah. So to riff on some of the things you've said, and then to also answer your question,
Sure.
it really helps to understand that our wants never end, and they were never meant to.
Okay.
And it took me a long time to
Okay.
realize that they were never really meant to end. But the challenge
Uh-huh.
is that our wants will make it seem like they will. They'll make it seem like,
Okay.
oh, once we get that house, or once we have that car, or once we graduate, everything will be perfect. But once we get there, we'll just want the next thing, and the one
Mm-hmm.
after that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really
Yeah.
important for a person to realize whatever they think is missing in their life, even if they had it, they likely wouldn't be fulfilled. And just like all other humans on this earth, as well as these
Mm-hmm.
rulers, they're just going to want more. And to not think that we're going to be different than them, and actually our wants will stop. And so, if a person can realize that, then they can stop chasing so many things that their brain is almost like a carrot on a stick is leading them to chase. It's almost kind of going to be never ending. So if a person can realize that, then they can be a lot more focused on what it is that they truly want or is fulfilling. They can I don't know if you're there. It looks like you cut out. In case you didn't, I'll just keep going. But so it's really important to understand that once our want is reached, whatever that is, we'll want something else. And then we'll want something after that. And it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that whatever want our brain is making us chase, that will eventually lead us to fulfillment. And once a person can understand that, they can be a little bit more careful of what wants they're chasing. They can actually look at the wants from an objective perspective as opposed to an impulsive one where it's like, I just need to have this. And they can look at what's going to create fulfillment for them, what's going to create more lasting health and happiness, and go after that. So I'll just give an example for myself. I am a person who
Sure. Sure.
has had a very overactive wanting mechanism. It's the reason I've traveled to 100
Mm-hmm.
countries, written 12 books, and done all sorts of activities like snowboarding, scuba diving, rock climbing,
Mm-hmm.
yoga, and so much more. My brain was stimulated by all the different things that there was to do. If I saw a nice car, I wanted it. Most anything I saw on television, I wanted as well. And
Yeah.
these wants were overpowering, meaning every time I had a new want, it made me forget the wants I already had or was working on, or it made me lose interest in them.
Mm-hmm.
Not only that,
Okay.
but they were really painful experiences. Like my muscles would tense up and my head would get in a knot. And even reading something as simple as personal development would make my mind go in all sorts of directions. And over time, I realized that if I just kept chasing all the wants my brain was producing, it would never end. And in fact, it didn't. It just, no matter how much I did or accomplished, my brain just wanted to create more wants. And now, when my brain goes overboard and just starts creating wants, I can step back and be like, hey, I know it's not going to be fulfilling. And I know as much as my brain is saying that I will be fulfilled once I get this thing, it likely won't happen. So now I just cut out all the wants my brain is producing and focus on a few that give me joy and fulfillment and work on my health. So I focus on writing because I enjoy writing. It's kind of like my career. But then I also like rock climbing, I like yoga, and a few other activities that really bring me joy in areas that I want to develop my skill. And then I cut out the rest. No matter what other
Mm.
wants my brain is producing, I don't think about them, I don't worry about them, and I don't consider them unless they relate to these four or five few focuses that I have. And I think that could really help a lot of people get a lot more focused because it's easy to, again, be convinced or tempted by all the wants our brain is producing, thinking it's going to lead us to fulfillment, when more than likely it's not. And another thing a person can do is look at people who have the thing that you want. And are they as happy and satisfied as your brain is making it seem like you would be if you had it? More than likely not.
Not, yeah.
And yeah, so yeah, again, it just kind of like goes back to focusing on a few things that you could go deep into that can bring the enjoyment that you really seek, but at the same time, that takes care of your health.
Yeah, wonderful. So let me just
You have a monkey mind. Don't look at me like you don't know what I'm talking about. You know where your thoughts race and you have a million and one things to do, but you can't even get to one of them. As soon as you start on one, your mind nags you about something else. As soon as you start on the something else, your mind nags you about something different. And you're jumping from one thing to the next without making any real progress on any of them. This is how sabotage shows up. Before you can finish or make progress on one thing, your brain entices you to start or jump to something else. Before making progress on something else, your brain tempts you with something different. And then it keeps you in this cycle. And this isn't even the worst part of the pattern. Check out the comments below to see how your own brain traps you in a complex maze of your own doing.
all right.
Perfect video for this
Carl,
conversation.
it sounds ironic that yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it sometimes if you misunderstand the concept, you could think or say to yourself, wow, my brain is me. But sometimes it be my worst enemy.
Yeah. It totally can be
So
your worst enemy.
yeah, yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So
Amazing.
this is
Amazing.
more or less
So
t go
when
ahead,
we
go ahead.
begin to, yeah, go ahead.
No, all I was gonna say is this
No,
is
you go ahead.
okay. This is more or less what I was talking about, and this is a really what I call the overactive wanting
Hmm.
mechanism, where the brain creates all sorts of
Yeah.
desires all the time. We see something and we want it. We hear about
Hmm.
something and we want that too. In fact, we don't have to hear or see anything, and our mind is pulling us in all directions. And it's an easy way to be sabotaged because as soon as we start on one want, our mind pulls us to another one. And as soon as we start on that one, it pulls us to another one. And if a person doesn't realize that that's happening, they could just go from one thing to another without finishing anything or making any progress. So again, it really does help to cut out a lot of the wants your brain is producing and just focus on the few that you can go deeper into and make the progress that you want. Go ahead.
Yeah, makes sense. So we have an audience. Blessed morning to you all, guys. It's Loretta Packet. We are 12:24 p.m. So we are AST, Atlantic Standard Time. She's probably on Eastern Time, or maybe Pacific Time, I should say. Yeah, yeah. Okay, great. So, and she also says, I'm in. Thank you. We have a small audience here, and we thank you very much for being here and for supporting us. Kam Knight is in the house, and he's talking about mastering the mystery of the mind. What about people who have been in a situation for a long time, Cam, and their mindset is set like concrete? And
Yeah.
even though you're beginning to show them ways in which they can develop new neural pathways, they just seem to be stuck in first gear or neutral and don't want to move out. How can you show them the benefits of changing that kind of thinking?
Well, the benefits are many because when we kind of get stuck in our old ways, we are not making progress and we're not moving
Hmm.
forward. And
Right.
although it might seem like it's comfortable, for most people, their comfort isn't actually comfortable. It's actually painful and
Hmm.
annoying. They're just stuck there because they don't really see a way out. And I think if a person can learn to become more placid, meaning to become more flexible, it just becomes a lot easier to do more things and new things and things that we find enjoyable and fulfilling. And I'm going to use the word help a lot because a lot of what we should be doing should also help us improve our health, because if we can improve our health, we can also improve how we feel and how we take care of ourselves, which is really ultimately what we're trying to go for, is how we feel about ourselves. And it's not easy, especially the longer we've stayed stuck, unfortunately. And I have, techniques for different levels a person's at, but when a person's really stuck, I have to let them know, or I think it's really important for people to know that change can be hard. It's not as easy as these motivational, inspirational books make it seem. Sure, it is possible, but sometimes people think it's much easier than it is. And when they go out to make change and they don't get the results, they get discouraged, thinking that there's something wrong with them or they don't have what it takes. I want people to really understand that it can take work and it can be difficult, and the way the mind and body are built, the more and longer we're doing something, the more our habits kind of get habituated to a certain pattern, and it can take some effort to break. So again, depending on how stuck someone is, I would recommend that they start with something as simple as self-talk, because when we're
Hmm.
dealing with resistance, we want to do little things that get the biggest results, little actions that we can
Okay.
take that can have the most impact. And I honestly believe that self-talk is one of the simplest thing a person can do that can start creating the changes and like changing the neural pathways and the brain patterns to help them make the bigger changes that they desire. And for most people, they probably know what self talk means, but if they don't, it's simply a set of statements that you repeat of the change that you want to have or have happen in your life. So if a person wants to become more
Mm.
confident, they would repeat statements like, I am strong and confident. I communicate my needs and wants. Now, on the surface, this may seem like something very simple, or that it couldn't really do that much, but it's huge. If a person can just start repeating the change that they want over time, or not even over time, but very quickly, find themselves acting it out. And the more they repeat it, the more the pattern gets ingrained, and the more they're able to do it. And the reason self-talk works so well, it's actually the power of repetition, because we humans are built around repetition. In order to get good at something, we need to have practice. And for something to become a habit, we need to do it repeatedly. And they say success is habit, so success just requires doing something repeatedly. Now, what's really interesting is that there's three types of repetition. People think of repetition just as the physical variety, like getting up and doing something over and over. But there's two other forms of repetition people don't understand, and one is self-talk. It's verbally repeating something, and the more we repeat something, the more it actually changes our inner thinking and patterns to act that behavior out. The second is also visualization. So a person could close their eyes and in the morning visualize themselves doing the things that they want to be doing. And the more they visualize that, the more they build those neural pathways in their brains, or they imprint that activity into their brain, which in a way is a form of repetition that can help them develop the habits that they're looking for.
Okay, great. So I just want to do some sharing here.
Sure.
We're gonna look at yeah, we're gonna look at some of the works that you have been doing,
So that's
and up here we have self-talk,
yeah.
your way to success, and you were just speaking about that. I think I probably would have had two other
You cut out there. What was that? Yeah, I can't hear you, so I don't know if it's on my end or if it might be on yours. All right. Well, I'll just talk about self-talk. So that was one of the first books I wrote. And I'm such a firm believer of self-talk that not only was that one of my first books, but I dedicate a chapter on self-talk to most of the books I have written. And it's actually the foundation and fundamental of a lot of the work I do. Because, like I said, when we're trying to create change, we want to do the littlest things that can have the biggest results. And as I mentioned, I truly and honestly believe self talk is one of the smallest changes that we can make that can have the biggest impact on our life. In fact, some of the biggest, most successful people in the world attribute their success to self talk. I believe
Mhm.
Dwayne Johnson or The Rock, Serena Williams, a lot of athletes talk about how they have a regimen of self talk that they affirm on a regular basis. So I really think if a person who's really stuck, just wants something to get started, wants to do something to get started, this is the place to start. And now I do want to give some instructions on self talk if somebody is interested in starting. One is you want to pick a set of statements around a specific area. So the example I started with was confidence. So you would create, 5 to 8 or 12 statements revolved around confidence. Like, I'm a strong, confident person. I easily communicate my needs and wants. I'm comfortable around others. And then you want to repeat those statements daily. It's about consistency. So repeat it at least one time a day. And you want to try to repeat each statement 10 times. It's not that hard. It's just writing out the statements and then every day looking at it and repeating it out loud. It's not about looking at the statement, it's actually about repeating it. And you can repeat it in your head, but it's better if you repeat it out loud. What's even better is to repeat it out loud with emotions and belief. But it could be hard for somebody to do it with positive emotions and beliefs in the beginning. But as long as they repeat it, they will start to see the changes in their life.
Yeah. So how do the desires that we have, the wants that we have, how do all of these things play into the level of resistance that we see or experience from time to time?
So one of the things I say is that our own wants can be a hindrance in getting them. And so in other words, our wants can create a resistance in getting them. And it goes back to what I had kind of said earlier that our brain produces so many wants that it's difficult to go after all of them. So as soon as we start on one want, our brain begins thinking us about another. As soon as we start on that one, it pulls us towards an even different one. And we get
Mm-hmm.
pulled in all directions and we can't move in any one. But that's just
Yeah.
one challenge of the want. There are other challenges of wants where a person could have a strong want, and this is where someone wants something really, really badly. This is often referred to as having a burning desire. Many coaches and experts talk about having a burning desire and the importance of having one, though I would disagree, and that's because when our wants grow, so does our resistance. And a great analogy for this is Einstein's theory of relativity. One of Einstein's theories, the theory of special relativity, says that space and time are not separate. The three dimensions of space, up, down, north, south, and east, west, as well as time, are one and the same. It's the same fabric. In fact, scientists and physicists don't refer to space and time separately, but they call it space time. And in many ways, our wants and resistance are the same. It's the same fabric. So when our wants grow, so does our resistance. And our resistance growing makes our want grow even more. And that in turn
So
makes
that's
our
all.
resistance grow even
Yeah.
further. And very quickly it becomes this feedback loop where now we want this thing really bad and we can't have it in really bad. So one of the challenges of our wants is having an overactive want where our brain is pulling us in all directions. But the other challenge is that when we want something really, really bad, the natural tendency for the brain is to create an equal amount of resistance. And so in these situations, it helps to actually reduce the want. It's to bring it down because when we can reduce the want, we can reduce the resistance, and reducing the resistance will make it easier to do the thing. Now, this is just two challenges of want, the overactive want and the strong want. But there's another one, which I call the conflicting want. This
Mm-hmm.
is where, so as I mentioned, the part of the brain that creates wants, it's completely unrestrained. It's creating wants one after another. So it doesn't check to see if the want that it's created conflicts with another want. So a person can have two wants that are conflicting, meaning having one requires giving up another. A couple
Right.
examples of this would include somebody would want to be famous, but at the same time, they want privacy. Or a lot of people want to find that special someone, and at the same time, to date others. There's
Mm.
a conflict there. Like having
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
inherently means giving up another.
Yeah.
Now, when a person goes after both, almost always they achieve neither. That's because you can't have both. So there's another challenge of how wants can create resistance.
Wow. So Loretta seems to be touched and moved. She says, "So true, brother. I used to be afraid to take chances." And then she followed up by saying, "Being encouraged by my first child, I started my own cake business and be so successful and confident." Wonderful.
Nice,
Thank
nice.
you. Thank you. Yes, it's nice. Nice indeed. So, in terms of the future and going forward, what would you say are some of the things that people need to continue to look at in terms of the practices now that they should undertake to maintain the ascendancy and a better understanding of how these two factors of the brain work, and in particular the conflict that can arise from time to time,
Yeah,
because as you rightly say, you cannot achieve both at the same time, and you
yeah,
more than likely end up with zero. So, what are the next steps that they need to take to ensure that they don't fall into that kind of mindset trap and, end up being a loser in the
yeah.
end?
Yeah, so the brain is very complex. In fact, one famous scientist said it may be the most complex structure known in the known universe. And
Hmm.
I wholeheartedly believe that. So it's really important to understand that going after something is not just a matter of having a desire. So we have the part of the brain that creates wants, and it can be the very thing that holds us back. And as I mentioned,
Yeah,
there's various
yeah,
ways: the overactive want, the strong want, the conflicting wants, and there's other wants. But even if we can figure out a specific want to go after, then resistance comes up. And like I said, resistance is a part of the brain that checks to see if what we want to do or if our desire
Hmm.
is safe and worth going after. And it's the
Yeah.
one that checks to see if we have the time, energy, and resources to go after it. And but that's not where it ends. It goes through a whole checklist of items to see if we should be able to do it. And if it doesn't give the green light, we can't do it.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's important to understand that just because you figure out the one or few wants you want, the resistance might still get in the way. And what's really interesting about resistance is that when it stops us, it doesn't tell us that it's stopping us. It doesn't
Mm.
say, you know, Andy, this thing that you're trying to do, it kind of threatens our self image. So we're just going to stand here and do nothing. Or that thing that you want to do over there, it kind of goes against our habits. So we're just going to stand back and blend in with the crowd. No, that's not what happens. Resistance uses manipulative tricks, and it's really important to understand the tricks, the manipulative tricks resistance uses, so we're not manipulated by them. So that's really the next tip is, or the next thing a person needs to understand is that when their brain stops them, it uses all sorts of tricks to stop them. And some of these tricks are so devious, it actually can make us think like we're making progress when we're not.
Hmm.
And if you'd like, I could talk
Wow.
about some of the tricks.
Yeah. Well, let me just show you another comment as well.
Sure.
Okay. She says she went to culinary class and graduated with honors, top of the class. Now she is not afraid.
Nice.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, Cam,
Congratulations.
go ahead. Yes, of course. This is so interesting. Go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. So, a lot of the tricks, like one of the most simplest trick is that we'll push something off to later. So anytime we
Mm,
want to do something, we'll just
yeah.
go, you know what? I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it this
Mm-hmm.
weekend. I'll do it next week. I'll do it next month or next time. And what's
Mm-hmm.
interesting is when the next arrives, we push it off to the next and next and
Mm-hmm.
next
Mm-hmm.
until one of two things happens. One, we're either married, have two kids, a stressful job, or no more time, and no more time, or we completely forget the goal. So I want people to understand anytime they hear themselves say next or later, it's likely a trick of resistance, and there's a good chance they're not going to do it next time or later. And if there wasn't resistance, they would have done it next time. So anytime they hear themselves or hear the voice of next or later in their head, they have to be careful because there's a good chance, like I said, they might not do it next time or later, and they'll just keep saying it either until they forget the goal or they just don't have time for it. So that's just one of the tricks. Another trick is that the brain will start creating all sorts of excuses like, I don't have time, I don't have money, or I don't have the energy. And when the excuses come up in our brain, we think we're the ones thinking them because the voices are in our head. We assume we came
Mm,
up with it.
yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, but the reality is it's a trick of resistance. And the resistance can go to great lengths to make excuses like, I don't want to support that. It goes against my beliefs. It's not, you know, it's I have this condition. And almost always that's all BS because for the things they have little resistance about, those excuses don't come up.
Mm-hmm.
And so they have to be very careful of when they hear excuses, when they have a desire and they start making excuses, the excuses isn't likely them. It's just a part of their brain trying to hold them back. And if they
Yeah.
think it's them, that they actually thought it through, then it could really, put the brakes in their lives. But here's a sneaky trick that a lot of people don't know is that a lot of times when we want to do something, we'll feel superior to it. Like, oh, I'm too good for it. I don't need to do that. Or, I'm above it. And that's another trick of resistance. When we start feeling we're too good for something, it's our brain try to put the brakes on going after it or doing it because now we feel good. And a lot of times, we think we're the ones who are making the decision or thinking through that we're good, but it's really an automatic response. So these are just some of the tricks that our brain creates, or that happen when we want to do something. And a lot of times, as I mentioned, it can feel like we're the ones thinking through and making the decision, but it's really resistance. So if anybody ever comes across this in their life, it's really important that they step back and really look at uh, the voices in their head to make sure that it's not they're not being stopped by their resistance, and it is and that they actually don't want to do that thing.
Mm. Wow. Interesting. That is really deep and
Yeah.
resounding, Kam. Yeah, thank you. So that leaves me to ask this question now. Is there a technique, a way, a system that we can use to examine these pushbacks to see if the evidence of what the voice is saying is actually true or it's just resistance acting up?
Sometimes it's not easy, to be honest.
Hmm.
That's because, like I said, that the brain is pretty complex, and
Yeah.
it really helps to understand, like, are the voices in my head, are they the voice of my desire or are the voice of resistance? Because they're both our voices.
Hmm.
It's just one is pushing us forward and
Hmm.
while the other is pulling us back. And so if a person
Yeah.
can understand that we have voices with different motivation and drives, and they can all seem like they're our voice, but know that a part of some of those voices are just designed to hold us back, then they can be a little bit more cautious of the voices that come up, especially the ones that are trying to hold us back or they're trying to stop us. We can look at it logically, like, am I really above this? Like, do I not want to do this because I'm afraid, or do I not want to do this because I just don't want to do it and won't find it fulfilling? They'll have to kind of ask themselves that. Though, if a person really wants to understand the voices in their head, it's actually quite easy exercise a person can do. There's two I can give. One is they can just close their eyes and just pay
Hmm.
attention to all the voices that are there. They'll hear a voice like, "I'm not good enough," or "This won't work," or "It'll take too much effort." And notice all that voices that are there. And usually those are the voices of procrastination and sabotage. And when we can look
Yeah.
at from a third person those voices, we could see that they're not us. And the way to do that is just by kind of closing our eyes and just paying attention to all the voices that are coming up. The other thing, it actually goes back to self-talk, is anytime we repeat a set of statements, our unconscious is going to react to the statements. So if we say, "I'm confident and strong," our unconscious might say, "No, you're not." Or if we say, "I can communicate my needs and wants," it might throw up images from our past where that wasn't the case. So those are really our inner beliefs about ourselves. And we don't really get to hear it all the time, but we can trigger what those beliefs are. And self talk is a really great way to do that. We can just create some statements of what it is that we want or where we want to be or what we think about ourselves and repeat those statements. And as we're repeating them, listen to how our unconscious reacts. And those reactions are a telltale sign of what's actually going on inside of you. And the more, I guess, resistive the unconscious is to the statements, the more resistance is there. So they can understand what the resistance are. Though, as far as a framework of how to kind of move past, I use different frameworks, but I'll talk about one. And this
Hmm.
framework is about how a person takes action. So some people are really good at getting excited about a lot of stuff, but they never take action, right? And then some people are good at taking action, but they stop shortly after they start. So they don't really make much progress. And then some
Hmm.
people are really good at making progress, but they sabotage themselves right before they get to the end.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then some people will actually make it to the end, but they'll stop doing the thing that got them there and then they'll regress. So there are four patterns that a
Wow.
lot of us fall into. And depending on where that person is, there's a different technique they can use. So if a person is good at getting excited about things but never starting, well, they have to cut out all the other wants and pick one. No matter what other wants their brain is creating, they can't think about or worry about it until that first one is done. So it's really important for them to pick one. For a person that's good at starting, but they stop before making progress, then it really helps to use a technique that is popular with meditating. So there's two kinds of meditation. If you take all the forms of meditation, it kind of comes down to two. One is trying to clear your head of any thoughts, and the other is trying to hold on to a single thought. Now, with both, it's difficult to clear your thoughts or hold on to something forever. But that's not the goal of meditation. The goal is once thoughts do appear or you lose that thought you're holding on to, you jump right back in. And then when you lose a thought, you jump back in again. So for people who are good at starting things, it's really important that when they fall off, they just jump right back in
Yeah,
instead of
yeah.
beating themselves up or whatever.
Hmm.
Just say, okay, I fell off, jump back in. And then they're going to fall off again because it's human nature. And when they do, jump back in. When they fall off again, just jump back in.
Hmm.
If they
Yeah.
keep doing that, they'll start building habit to stay in it for longer and they'll make it to the end. Now, for somebody who gets to near the end but sabotages themselves, what they need to understand is that they need to build a muscle of completing things. Like we, as humans, being habitual beings, we need to build a muscle for anything we're doing. But we also need to build a muscle for starting things. We need a muscle
And
for
finish
sticking
it.
with things. And we need a
Yeah,
muscle
yeah.
for finishing things. And so for
Right.
such people, they need to just get into a habit of finishing anything they start, no matter how much effort it takes. And then for the last person, what they need to understand is that success is much harder to keep than it is to achieve. So we like to think that success is hard to achieve, but it's even harder to keep it. And when a person achieves a success, they think, oh, yeah, I've achieved it. The hard work is over. So they let
Mm.
go and they begin to
Yeah,
slide.
yeah,
But that's not the moment. It's like not only do you like not let go, but you actually put in more effort so you can stick with it. So that's one framework. There's other frameworks,
yeah,
but I think this would be a really good one for your audience.
yeah. So Loretta takes a spin on it that's basically faith-based, or as the people say, spiritual. So true, brother. Confusing voices. So you have to put God to guide the voices that comes across. And the last part, she says, that's where God comes in to fall off and on. So yeah, putting that spin on it, because there are times when we can't determine, we can't decipher, and we need to put it in the hands of
Yeah.
Him who knows all things,
I
and
mean,
let that
if
decision be
so
wow.
like if we want to use that analogy, you've seen the videos and cartoons of the devil and saint on your shoulder. Yeah, so you can think of like
Yeah.
it's not really the
Yeah.
devil or saint. One is a wanting mechanism that's like
Yeah.
enticing you to go after and do things, and the other is
Hmm.
resistance telling you to hold you back. So that's a really good
Yeah.
analogy people can use.
Yeah. Wonderful. Okay, so we have come to the end of this class. It has been a class with Cam,
Yeah, thank
and
you.
I'm just gonna put up some stuff there, Cam, and you can tell them where they can get your books, over a dozen books that Cam has written, as well as if they need to make contact with you and get your expertise and your core competencies to help them in their mindset struggles. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, sure. So I have a dozen books in the area of mental performance, such as reading, memory, concentration, and mind mapping, as well as personal mastery, such as self talk, visualization, and goal setting. And they can get all of that at my website, kamknight.com, KAMKNIGHT.com. I have a course called Conquer Internal Resistance, which kind of goes even deeper into this topic. We talked about the wanting mechanism and the challenges of the wants, but there's even more that this course discusses. And we really didn't even cover the reasons resistance comes up. and
Yeah.
the course goes really deep into that. And more
Yeah.
importantly, we just touch on a few areas of the tricks of resistance, and the course goes,
Mm-hmm.
discusses like
Mm-hmm.
dozens of tricks that our brain's using on us. And they can get that at endsabotage.com, END SABOTAGE.com. And then if they want, I developed a technique that helps people quickly go inside their unconscious to see their resistance and the challenges that are in there, as well as relieve years of trauma, PTSD, and even abuse. And if they
Mm-hmm.
want that, they can reach out to me at kamknight.com, KAM at
Mm-hmm.
KAMKNIGHT.com.
GHT. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Wonderful. So the final chat here, it says, thank you all for the class today.
Yeah.
Blessed day to the rest of y'all. So, Kam, you have really been on point. Wow. What an amazing broadcast this has been. We're going to have you back again at some point in time in the future
Yes.
to share more of your nuggets and this vital information. So,
Yeah.
from here, we say bye to you guys. This is Andy of Andy's Personal Development. Thank you for those being in the audience and our special guest, Kam Knight. The episode entitled Mastering the Mystery of the Mind with Kam Knight. Until next time, we say in so long, Godspeed, God bless, Shalom, Namaste.
Thank you
Bye for
very
now,
much, Andy, for
guys.
having me on, and I hope your
Thank you.
audience really enjoyed it. So thank you.
Amen. Wonderful. Thank you, Kam.